before we get into the war itself, we want to teach you a little bit about some basic military terminology and some weapons that are going to be prevalent in this conflict, which people started referring to as the Great War. Obviously, they didn't know that World War II was going to happen afterwards, so nobody was calling it World War One. All right, so let's talk about military terminology first, some basic things we want to know. First term, infantry. What you see here, just little graphics or little cartoon kind of figures of infantry. Infantry are foot soldiers, regular foot soldiers. They're the ones who are actively engaged in combat. There are so many support roles for military operations, but infantry are there to fight. You see the gray figure with the little spike helmet. That's a German infantryman, and he's got a rifle with him. And the spiked helmet was a feature that the Germans adopted. They thought it looked a little more intimidating. It doesn't have any real functional purpose. But you see they've got the grayish looking coat, and they are opposite of the British and French soldiers, which went more for this olive drab green that you see in the rounded top helmet. Those are infantrymen, regular foot soldiers who they're involved in fighting. If you join the military and you sign up to be part of the infantry, your job is going to be to fight and to kill. Okay? Artillery. Artillery has come a long way. You see a little graphic here, which when we think of artillery, you should think of cannons. And cannons, this right here is just a little GIF of a cannon that you might think of from, say, like the Revolutionary War in America or the Civil War with cannonballs and the classic looking cannon. But artillery in World War I has advanced considerably. So the cannons of this era, we want to show you. Take a look at this artillery piece. This particular cannon, you see obviously it's got giant wheels to make it more mobile. You can figure out the size compared to the people in the picture. And those artillery shells are extremely dangerous. In the past, if you know anything about artillery and cannons previously, they would be what you would call muzzle loaded, meaning you put the cannonball or the shell in from the top. These are breech loaded, meaning you can see the bottom of it, which has a contraption, a mechanism that you open up, and after you fire it, the shell just comes out. Artillery shells, you can see right there, it looks like a giant bullet, and you fire that out, and it basically ignites the gunpowder inside, and as it gets close to the ground, it basically has a mechanism that will cause it to explode. And it's not just the explosion that's a problem for people, it's the shrapnel, the shards of metal that explode from the metal casing that are going to cause significant numbers of death. So the artillery pieces are absolutely terrifying. To give you a little bit better concept, take a look at some of these particular shells here. You can see some of these are the size of human beings. You can also see they're marked with a size like a 14-inch shell, a 16-inch shell, and that's talking about the diameter of it. So if you measure the diameter of the circle at the bottom, that gives you the measurement. So if you hear people talking about an 8-inch gun, a 12-inch gun, that's what they're referencing. The weight is much more significant. Also, to give you a better understanding, take a look at this artillery piece and how they have to load this. Obviously, the shells are so heavy you need a pulley system to do it, and those shells are pretty magnificent in size. This one, even more complex. Man, you see these are German soldiers loading this particular artillery piece, and these things had significant range also. They could fire at targets accurately from several miles away. Okay, our next military term, what we call armor. Armor refers to tanks. When you're talking about armor, we're literally talking about an armored vehicle. And tanks are really important in the development of warfare. They hadn't seen them to this particular point, and it's the first time they're going to make an appearance. This is a World War I era tank, and these are Americans. You see also, I love the side eye that the guy inside the tank is giving his friend there. Tanks are really important because not only can you put large cannons on it, but as the name suggests, it's an armored vehicle. And so what you would do, a lot of times your infantry would work in coordination with the tanks. The tanks would roll up first, and you'd have your infantry behind it as shielded from gunfire. And then essentially, as you got close to the enemy objective or the enemy line, you would fan out and then attack. That way, the tank could give you as much protection as humanly possible until you got close enough to the enemy to make it a legit fight. Okay. Now, some new weapons other than just the tank that are involved in there as well. Okay, and these will be significant. We always find new ways to kill people. Submarines will be part of World War One. The Germans, in particular, made very good use of submarines. These now were to the point where they were practical. Submarines have been around for a while, but for a long time, navies thought that fighting underneath the water wasn't a fair way to fight. The Germans had no problem with that, and they do quite a bit of damage with what they called U-boats, short for underwater boat. You're also going to see in this particular war airplanes. These are German biplanes at the time, and originally these airplanes were just used to fly over enemy lines and get information about what the battlefield looks like from below and what the troops on the other side were doing. Now, these airplanes eventually figured out, though, that we can't give away information like that. So they started carrying pistols in the airplanes and shooting at each other, which definitely pretty dangerous. The pistols were always a requirement anyway because pilots, if you got shot down for some reason or your plane malfunctioned or caught on fire, essentially you didn't have a parachute, so your options were to take your own life or just die in the airplane. So either way, it was a bad thing. Just to show you this, obviously you don't need to try to remember these, but there is a difference in the types of airplanes that are used. The longer airplanes, the bigger airplanes are what we call bombers. They are flying missions and just dropping bombs straight down over top of targets. They're bigger, they're slower, but they carry more bombs. The smaller airplanes are fighters, and your fighter airplanes are more maneuverable. They get machine guns attached to it, and maybe they carry a single bomb. They're there to work as like an escort for the bombers. The bombers aren't really able to defend themselves, so you've got the fighter planes that fly around them to help provide protection for them. Fighter planes could run missions on their own. They could also take their machine guns, shoot other planes, and at the same time, they could shoot the machine gun at the ground at soldiers who really don't have any cover. So these are particularly dangerous instruments, and now airplanes are an important part of any military operation. World War I, it didn't take them too long to figure that out. And finally, a particular weapon that's going to change warfare is the machine gun. Machine guns had been around for some time. Really, in the American Civil War, Gatling comes up with a Gatling gun, one of the first models of the machine gun. But machine guns are not what you think. A lot of people think machine guns are handheld automatic weapons, and that's not what those are. These are very heavy guns. Usually these machine guns that you see here weighed 40 to 50 pounds. The mount underneath it is going to weigh 20 to 30 pounds. And it's meant to be in a fixed position so that you can shoot it because the recoil, the kickback on it is pretty ridiculous. But with that mount on it, it takes that away. You can also shoot in 360 degrees. It's a pretty impressive thing. And machine guns fire at such a high rate that it changes the way that warfare has to be done. Remember, typically, war was fought where opposing armies would basically advance on each other in large lines, and they would see who's more accurate shot, who's got more guts, and who's not going to run away. Machine guns completely changed that. A machine gunner with somebody there to continue giving the belt-fed ammunition that you see, somebody to carry the mount. You can move from one place to the next and open fire and unleash hundreds of bullets per minute. You could stop a squadron of men advancing on your position way before they ever get to where you are. So that's going to be a completely new tactic that's going to be used, and it's going to cause a lot of death in World War I.